move forward, I'll take approval of the meeting minutes motion, if anyone has one.
So moved.
You get a second?
Second.
Anyone opposed? All right, approved meetings. Macy, stop me when I do this wrong. Every time's the first time. All right, I'm good. So I'm gonna kick it over to you, Elaine, for update on the report.
Okay, for this quarter, which is quarter 3, there's some standard detail here regarding procurement operations. The most salient items that I draw your attention to are related to the virtual working or remote working of employees. At our last meeting, we were looking toward the return to work of procurement division employees. I would note for you all that procurement division employees are working in the office, and Dr. Kroom working from home. 2 days a week in the office, 3 days a week from home. Again, this is a really, the processes that we have for the procurement division are really suited to a remote working environment. Again, a lot of electronic processes and et cetera. And we're going to continue with these modifications to our working into the foreseeable future. That includes, of course, some evaluation committee meetings being held remotely and via WebEx, as well as some other procurement-related meetings that are being held via WebEx. You're going to see on the agenda also a modification to the procurement regulations recommended by the law department related to conduct while in these electronic meetings, and I'll reserve some commentary on that until we get to that agenda item, if that suits you. One other thing that I would note related to the virtual working environment that we're in now 2 days a week is that, and I don't know necessarily that it's directly related, but that we've seen an uptick in efforts to commit fraud using the iSupplier system. So very specifically, what we've seen are instances where there have been attempts to fraudulently access iSupplier accounts, which are the supplier registration accounts, which includes details for our transactional employees around their banking and where their payments should go. And that's what we've seen, the efforts to commit fraud being centered around attempting to access those accounts, divert payments to other banking, to other banks. And what we've done to address that is to meet with Metro's Chief Information Security Officer, and then he's worked with us to develop some processes that will allow us to thwart the success of some of those attempts. I mean, they're going to continue. So we've had to modify our processes, which unfortunately has caused some of our iSupplier interactions to slow, but we're making direct verbal contacts now with these vendors. Whenever we get what appears to be a request to change the ACH, we're making contact with them, and we've had about 3 instances now where we have been able to thwart those attempts. But that's a significant uptick. We just didn't see that before.
Were any of those efforts successful?
No.
Okay, good.
No. We had one that was almost successful, but it got all the way, it actually went to the department first. And because that was a departure from our previous protocol, that's what really stopped it. Under the normal circumstance, you wouldn't expect it to come, a request to come in from the department, but it did. And in that particular instance, the supplier's email had been hacked. And so that's what really kind of led to that whole process where they were able to get into their supplier account. And then they made contact with the project manager, which I don't know how they knew that within the department, but we were able to put the kibosh on it, which is important. During the third quarter, I think it's important to know, because I think a lot of people have probably seen this on television. There's been a lot going on with trash in Nashville. During this third quarter, the Procurement Division has worked extensively with both Metro Water Services and with the Mayor's Office to provide a solution to this very highly publicized issue. We have issued several emergency purchase orders to ensure that, trash is picked up, as well as engaged additional procurement activities to ensure that we've got sufficient coverage on an ongoing basis, but also to address any kinds of emergent situations which has arisen pursuant to, this whole Red River issue. What we didn't have before was we had standard routes. We didn't have any mechanism in place for emergency routes should that specific vendor be unable to address their route needs. And so now we've done that. Additionally, the Procurement Division held its first procurement summit, which I'm very excited and proud of our efforts with that. We had roughly 307 attendees virtually at that summit. We provided Metro employees who are engaged in some fashion or another in procurement in their departments, in their various departments. We provided them with tools and resources needed to better use the procurement process. The law department presented a session on ethics and conflicts of interest. We talked about effective use of sourcing and contract administration and performance management, as well as the Dbe utilization process, as well as business development. So I thought it was a really good summit. It was well received. We received a lot of feedback from departments about the benefit of having a summit like that. And to my knowledge, that was the first one that we've had for Metro employees, in an effort to make sure that those employees are better users of the procurement process. And finally, the FY23 budget prep process has kicked off. I'm always very cognizant of saying the budget season because I started out in Metro as a budget analyst. You probably didn't know that, Kelly. And one of the first things you learn is that the budget season never stops. It's like it's always going, right? But the budget prep process kicked into high gear during this last quarter. We, the leadership in our division, attended most of the departmental budget hearings. We didn't attend every single one, but we attended about 85% of those. And the purpose there was to understand what prospective upcoming purchase demands are going to be should the budget be funded as it was presented and the requests were made by the departments. The other part of this that I think is important for you all to know is that as part of the budget process, we made a request, the Procurement Division did, for $235,000 for the upcoming disparity study that is required by the Metro Code, as well as $50,000 for the development of a mentor protege program as recommended in the last disparity study and the minority enterprise growths and needs study. I would note also that our procurement code provides specific instances of actions that the BAO should undertake, which assume the existence also of a mentor protege program. Okay, during the last quarter, this is like the bane of my existence. The thorn that constantly stays in my side is trying to keep staffing where it needs to be. And in the period of time that I've been here, we've seen it kind of ebb and flow. We were fully staffed in the last quarter. We actually had a nice little period of time where we were fully staffed. We did have one employee who has submitted his resignation. That is Mr. Marlon Bynum, who came to us from the federal government. He has an opportunity to return to the federal government in a more lucrative position for him, working through a process that he fully understands because he was a federal employee working and contracting at the VA forever. And so it was an opportunity that he could not pass up. His last day is going to be tomorrow. And so we will undertake the process of filling that position. It's in the procurement resource group working with Terry Ray. So we will work toward filling that position. You've got in your packet the abstracts for the major procurements that are in excess of $5 million for this last quarter, that is January, February, March. So I invite you to take a look at those and please let me know if you've got any questions. You've got a lot of detail in those abstracts regarding the vendor, the amount of the contracts, the amount of competition that was included, how many vendors submitted, as well as the location of the vendor. I mean, there's some additional information that I think you'll probably find useful and beneficial. Okay, I'm going to defer to Christopher to talk about DBE utilization and to give just a brief EBO update.
Thank you, Michelle. So if you will turn to page 5.
Page numbers noted and appreciated. Thank you.
Look, we heard Judy's like, I got to get these page numbers.
This is the business utilization report. So this is the actual spend that happened during January and March of 2022. So the numbers are there. I just wanted to talk about the highlights of this. We more than doubled our SBE utilization from last quarter, and we're about 50% more money or percentage-wise spent with MWBEs in last quarter. So last quarter we were at 8.15% for MWBEs and 7% for SB participation and we were 11.59%, then 18.62 this period, this quarter.
Hey, Christopher, is that because of something special you guys are doing, or is it just the nature of the solicitations in the last quarter?
The solicitation, the utilization's up mostly because the overall spend is less. So last quarter, we were at 291 million, or 573 million. We're at 291 million this quarter. But when we compare it to last year, the spend is comparable to this time last year. So I would say during this part of the year, each year it's about the same amount spent.
So my question was specific about the MBEs. You said that percentage had gone up versus the prior quarter.
Yes.
And I was wondering, is there something we've done to attract more MBE participation, or is it just the solicitations were unique and specific to, like, is this a trend we should expect to continue to see, or is it just kind of an anomaly?
I think it's a blip.
Okay, got it.
She's a blip. She said, okay.
I think it's consistent with a period in time in the fiscal year where we see increased spending by departments. I think it's, we'll probably see this quarter of the next fiscal year, probably a comparable number, maybe higher, if we have more contracts where we've got the M&W requirement.
Got it.
So, but I would expect that the trend would be comparable. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that Chris was kind of answering part of my question, which is this, if you look at this over, let's say, a 3-year period, is it traditionally true that during these months you see a higher number of MBEs? So that's the question I thought you were originally being asked. So from a trend perspective, is this kind of what happens this time of the year? That was really my question.
For trend, I was getting that, but I was comparing, probably piggybacking off what Michelle said. The first quarter and the last quarter with the spend, it should be about the same.
So it isn't necessarily that there's an increased number of MBEs versus it's usually an increased number during these months anyway. That's what I was trying to understand.
Right, and my expectation would be as we continue to expand the EBO into more and more contracts, because we're starting to see our 5-year contracts cycle through, that hopefully we would see an increase in this number, but that the trend would be comparable, meaning proportionally, it would probably be, the numbers may not be the same, but proportionately it would probably be the same. And I'm guessing, because we're looking at numbers from the last fiscal year, but we're also acknowledging that some of these contracts that did not have the EBO applied are now culminating, and the EBO will be applied to them. So you should see an increase there as well.
On page 6, the next document that you have, this is our quarterly report compared to the other quasi-government agencies. And one thing that I like to bring to everyone's attention is previously we were the only organization that reported our sub-spend. However, if you look at this chart for this quarter, MMPS and MDHA, they also report their sub dollars down. So it gives us a truer picture of the utilization of agencies, and we're able to compare what we do with subs to some of those other agencies. And based on the numbers that we have here, in African American spend, we led in that area. And then let me see, what was the next one? And then also in African American women, we were second behind MNPS on the sub utilization. I think it's important to note that we can now, as we start going, they'll start reporting their information in here, and hopefully we can get others on board so that we can compare it across the board.
Can I ask a question on the small business one? The smaller chart down here?
Yes, ma'am.
And I may have asked this question before, I'm sorry, every time I see these, it feels like the first time. So the orange column is small business, and then the white column is what?
Everybody else.
So shouldn't orange plus white equal total? So how am I reading this? Like if you look at Metro subs, 17 and a half.
Okay, hold on.
I'm not sure what I'm reading here.
It doesn't include the M&W portion. That's why it's different. The other is going to be like other socio groups, or also what we call large or not-for-profits. So the total disadvantage, those numbers of NWB are going to be in the other chart. We've been told not to combine those. You asked that so that we weren't double counting.
So what you're saying then is that the small business is strictly small businesses or firms that are designated as small business. And then other than small business would be large white male-owned businesses and nonprofits.
Right, or uncertified firms.
Or uncertified, yeah.
And then
Not
the missing
inclusive
piece is
of-
what?
The missing piece are those firms that are certified as minority or woman-owned,
They're in the
Got it,
who are up here.
got it.
So you're looking at small business compared to non-small business, but exclusive of those M's and W's who are not small.
So the total prime spend, 454 on the top, and then the total prime spend of 449 in the bottom.
Excludes roughly, what, 5.5 million of M and W spend, is that right, Amber?
And that's somewhere in here.
with 33 million.
I'm looking at the 454 that says total prime spend, total business on the top right corner. And then same titles, total prime spend, total business in the bottom,
So the second one's total subcontractor spend.
right here. There.
Right here.
What is the difference between these two circled numbers?
Yeah. Here you go, Amber.
These two, this, and I'm sure I've asked this before, and I'm going to retain it this time, I promise. But what is the difference between these two numbers that have the exact same title?
Amber Gardner, please feel free to come to the table.
That's a good question. I'm trying to remember. They should be the same. I'm gonna kind of pick out. That is a mistake on my part. It looks like on the housing one, the subtotal got copied down instead of the prime. That's my mistake. I apologize. Yeah, they should be the same.
Okay.
I'll correct that and get it.
Yeah, we'll have to send an updated report to the board.
Got it. Sorry.
Thank you.
That's okay. I was like, what is the difference?
Function of numbers.
Threaten me with a good time, I'll catch them every time.
No, that's good. Appreciate it. Okay, Christopher, you want to pick that back?
Sorry, Christopher. What page are we on now, 7?
we're gonna go to seven is illustration of the chart. You can see it broken down. So what we just looked at on the first chart, 7, the comparative analysis, you can see it together on the bottom. So we're gonna move forward to page 8, which are the Ebo Program highlights. So specifically, these are proposed dollar figures of sub-utilization of M&Ws. So during the quarter, we had 17 contracts that with race and gender conscious goals on those. That was made up of 14 different solicitations during the quarter. The proposed spend totals $39.7 million, which was 16% as a combined business participation proposed. So this is the numbers that would happen if everything that was proposed at the end of the contracts pans out. It could increase as they could utilize the subs more than what they proposed. There were 23 unique MBEs that were proposed for utilization, 23 unique WBEs that were proposed. We did have 5 certified MBEs bid at the prime level, 3 certified women's bid at the prime level, and 8 Metro approved small businesses. Of those proposals, 2 contracts were awarded to MBE primes, 3 were awarded to WBEs, and 6 were awarded to SBE primes.
I do have a question about that, and it's really just to refresh my memory, because I know we talked about this before. These are the proposed, and I know we had some conversation around being able to know whether or not what was proposed was actually done prior to the end of the contract. What I don't remember is the process that we were going to use, or to see where we were before we finished all of the contracts, only to find out we had 20-something proposed and it ended up being only 5, or whatever the case may be. So remind me of what we were doing to look at that.
I believe in that conversation, we were stating that those numbers will be reflected in the annual reports that come out each year.
Okay.
So throughout the contracts, like we're monitoring those, doing monthly audits where the primes are reporting those payments and the subs have to confirm those payments. If we see any discrepancies, we're reaching out, trying to make sure they're utilizing them. But then at the end of the year, when we do our EBOA report, you should see what's actually been spent, and it would be reflective by those projects.
And since most of these are the normal Metro 5-year, that will give us something each year of that 5-year contract to know where they are.
Well, it's actually more than each year. I mean, these are the contract compliance folks out of BAO that are monitoring those projects on an ongoing basis. So they can describe the process, of course, better than I can, but there's a monthly audit process that they use to understand what the utilization is on each one of the contracts, and they're able to, the system that we use actually pushes a notification to each one of the subcontractors when payments have been made to the primes, and they have to acknowledge, the payments that have been indicated for them. So there is an ongoing process, so you don't, what I hear you describing, I think, is get to year 4 and realize that, you proposed to use 5 subcontractors, but you only used 1. You don't, that's the purpose of that active contract compliance process, so that you have a, real-time look at what's being used on an ongoing basis.
And when is that reported to the board? When do we get to see those numbers?
It's in here.
That was, because I'm just trying to remember.
The dollars are in here. The dollars are in here, but the snapshot of all of the unique vendors, we said would be reported in the annual report.
Fine, I mean, if it's in the annual, I just couldn't remember. I knew we talked about it, but I couldn't remember what we decided.
Yeah, you're seeing where you have the breakout in your report that shows subcontracting for Metro. Mm-hmm. Those are those numbers.
Right, let me be a little bit more specific. What I'm trying to make sure is that when I see this report, because this is very specific, these are proposed, I'm not necessarily looking at this, tying it back to what was proposed versus being able to see this, whether it's annually or not, saying that X number were proposed, but at year 1, we could see that of the 17, 13 actually happened. Year 2, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
There's literally a one-to-one comparison that we know that's exactly what we're looking at, not trying to decipher it between, not just the spend, but also, right now, what he's
firms.
reporting is the individual firms, not just the dollars.
That is the annual report.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
Thank you all. So that's all I have related to the EBO program, but I did want to share as we have the MLS project as the soccer stadium is in use now, as we're getting our final payments in and working on the closeout activity of that project. That had a 30% DBE target and is standing, I think it's going to hold up, we're at 36.58%. So overachievement of what the target was for that project.
Well, clearly the parking part of it was not assigned to your team.
And just as a point of clarification, that MLS participation is what we define as DBE. So it's inclusive of small, minority, and women-owned businesses. Okay. And then the next report that I would turn your attention to is our business development and outreach report. Are you going to present that, Zach?
I think that's fine, yeah.
Okay, let's do it.
Travail's not here today, so I'm going to give you the BDO report. It's very quick. You can read it for yourself. What's there? There's one correction that I would make, which is on the direct training hours. That should read 5 instead of 2, and that's my fault. But the numbers are elevated this quarter because we did have our procurement summit where we had, I think, 307 people attend. So those numbers are slightly, not slightly, they're significantly larger than they would normally. B, our MB, WB, LGBTB, SB, and SDB numbers are at the bottom, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
How many of these 531 people are actual businesses versus kind of your colleagues at other issuers and like SBA, DOT, like kind of the admin versus the actuals people?
We don't count the admin in the numbers of attendees.
I mean, like SBA, Chamber, like all really nice to participate, but not actual businesses we're helping. Like how many of these 531 is actual business people?
All of those. We wouldn't count any of the. I would term
So
those
when you
administrators.
answered the question the first time, you actually answered the question the first time?
No, I answered it when you understood it. That's when I answered it.
Okay, that's impressive. How many like businesses do you think that is?
It's hard to tell because sometimes there are two groups of people that you have. You have prospective business owners, people who have just entered the entrepreneurial field, which we see a lot more of in the last 2 years during COVID, people who left their jobs to start their own businesses. And we have a lot of people who are in that category. And then we have our suppliers who are existing suppliers, and then you kind of have people who aren't our suppliers but are businesses but may have multiple people on the call. Generally, I don't have a way to track the specific answer to that question, but those are kind of the 3 broad groups that it holds into.
Okay.
And I would note too that these partners that you mentioned here, in some instances, these are folks that we're working with to deliver that specific training to those individual businesses, so. You also have the key performance indicators for the quarter. I'll just there are a lot of numbers, so if you've got any specific questions, Amber Gardner is our chief. I give you a promotion every time I say it. She's the chief data officer. Every time I call her name, she's the procurement data officer. Can answer some questions. She's like up to her eyeballs in data, procurement data, so.
That was on page 17 or page
10, I'm sorry. I gotta get used to the page numbers. Might need a magnifying glass for
I
it
was
too.
going to say.
I would say just one note in the section of this report related to professional development. We are beginning the process of certifying employees here within the procurement division. So in BAO, we have several who are certified to be contract compliance specialists so that they can effectively manage the EBO program. But in terms of being certified buyers, we have 3 that are currently designated to begin the process of getting certified, and that has to be completed within a year. Is that a year? And then in the next fiscal year, we will have another 3 that will start. And the goal is to have all of our buyers certified as public professional buyers, certified public professional buyers. Okay.
Can I take off my board hat for a second and put on my finance director hat? And I just want to highlight that the funding for that certification is something that we made a priority in our budget request, because we do want to keep people, and that is a value add. So those kind of things that kind of used to have to go your own way on is something that this division has made a priority. So I just wanted to highlight that for you, because I think that's pretty impressive.
I think everybody on staff and procurement knows that Kelly is about professional development. I've told them that this finance
Well, I
director.
wouldn't toot my own horn, but.
Well, I'm gonna toot it for you. Yeah, I've told him that, she's been very interested in ensuring that we, have the best qualifications for the work that we can have. And that, you gotta designate specific resources to help people grow and develop and be the best professionals they can be. And that's refreshing for us, So thank you.
Well, now we just need the budget to pass, but
That's right.
it made its way in there.
Okay. And then the final note is under miscellaneous within the purchasing agent's report. That's back to page 3. I'll just note that we had 2 protest hearings during the quarter. They were both related to the medical benefits RFP. There was a protest lodged by Blue Cross Blue Shield and one that was lodged by Aetna. The protest lodged by Blue Cross Blue Shield has been resolved, but the protest that was lodged by Aetna has been appealed. So there's one appeal, and that's about all I can say about that. Okay, any questions? That concludes my report.
Do you want to walk through the proposed modification, or?
Sure. Macy, are you there?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. I will note that as we have been working again in kind of this, digital environment, looking at page 4, in this digital environment, we have seen some specific instances where there was suggestion that some of the procurement activity, because it's being, conducted via WebEx, that it may have been recorded. And some of that activity is under what we call in procurement the cone of silence, meaning you can't really talk about that until the process is complete. You shouldn't be divulging any of that information. But of course, we're having to accommodate a pandemic and, maintaining safety for folks. So we're engaging those activities digitally. And if we have evaluation committee meetings that are held digitally, or presentations or interviews as part of the active procurement process, what we want to do is to be able to prohibit, any of the participants from recording that activity. So we worked with Tom Cross over in the law department to come up with some language that would be appropriate. His recommendation was that we present that to you all and include it as a specific modification in the procurement regulations. And so what you have before you is that specific language that indicates that the purchasing agent would have the specific discretion to make those audio and audiovisual recordings, but that no one else would have that discretion, which would prohibit them then from, say, taking their iPhone and recording, their screen and what's going on in that specific meeting. And so that's the language that's before you. It is an addition to Regulation 4.48-03001, which is communications during the procurement process. I'm available for questions if you've got some questions on it.
I know that you said that it was recommended by the law department. when I read it, the first question I had is this legal? And the only reason I ask that is because of something that we dealt with some years ago, that the attorneys in Metro shared with us what our limitations were in terms of saying that someone could not record us. In a conversation, we were on the phone, we didn't know we were being recorded. There was some law issues that they talked to us about being, that suggested that we did not have the ability to impose something like this. I don't have any issue with what we were asking to do, but when I read this, that immediately came to my mind. So I guess what I'm curious about from a legal perspective is what makes this legal?
Well,
So, do you want me to answer that?
I was about to say, the only thing I was going to say, Macy, is that I don't know that there's any prohibition against recording a public meeting, but this is specific to activity that is covered through that confidential procurement process, and I'll turn it over to the attorney.
Sure. And was that Ms. Kroom that was speaking? I can't tell.
Yeah, that's Dr. Kroom.
Okay, Dr. Kroom, so you are correct that the state of Tennessee is a one-party recording state. So for something like a phone call, you're right that we couldn't impose some prohibition on some recording a phone call. But I think what is in mind here is recording like an official proceeding, like a pre-offer meeting or a bid protest hearing. Metro has the authority to set the rules that apply to an official Metro proceeding. So that's where it's a little bit different than just recording like a phone call.
I mean, that's helpful. I just, again, remember that being kind of really impressed upon us about our limitations when it comes to certain things. That's why I was curious, how is this legal when in other situations it's not?
And as
Yeah, I think it's just the difference in that this would be an official proceeding and not like a public meeting or just a casual telephone call. These are like official Metro proceedings that these rules would apply to.
Thank you.
And as a matter of process, as these meetings are established, then we will provide specific language in the meeting requests indicating this prohibition. So that is how practically it will be, I don't want to say enforced, but implemented. Any other questions?
Do you need a motion to approve? You need an action for us to approve this?
Yes, it is an action item.
Can I get a motion to approve? Whoa, sorry, do I need to ask for additional comments? Was I supposed to do that? Does anyone have any other questions? Do my own thing. Can I get a motion to approve?
Motion to approve the
Second.
proposed procurement regulations modification.
Second.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Does anyone have any other items for discussion? Late files, anything? Okay, so we are scheduled to reconvene on August 18th. With that, do I need a motion to adjourn, or are we just?
Gotta have a motion to adjourn and a second.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good rest of the day.
And again,
Doesn't have to
apologies
be
for our
voted on.
technology
It
issues.
just has to
It would have been done 20 minutes ago.
Uh,
Sorry.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.